Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So April was quite a month on the legal front. We saw the conviction of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. And we saw toward the end of the month, guys like Rudy Giuliani and Matt Gaetz moving ever closer to criminal indictments. So I think we can say that the arc of April has been bending toward justice. Here's a quick recap of the legal stories for the month of April 2021. Hope you enjoy. You know what, friends? Every murder case has more than just one victim. Let's talk about what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd's girlfriend, Courtney Ross. Because justice matters. So it was a really good day for the prosecution in the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. In short, it was a good day for justice. And justice matters. You know, friends, it's time. It's time for investigations, criminal investigations, state criminal investigations of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Mike Pence, and others for avoidable COVID-19 deaths. It's time. For more than 500,000 dead Americans and their families, their loved ones, their friends, their communities, it's time. It's time for state criminal investigations into avoidable COVID-19 deaths. It's time. It's time for justice. Because justice matters. Matt Gaetz is, as we'd say in the courts of D.C., gonna get got. Let's talk about why that is. Because justice matters. So let's do a quick recap of today's trial testimony in the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. And let's see where we are on the road to justice. Justice for George Floyd, justice for his family, justice for the Minneapolis community. Because justice matters. So let's talk about when constitutional rights collide in a criminal trial. When a defendant's Sixth Amendment right to call witnesses in his favor, to compel the testimony of witnesses who could be helpful to him, when those rights collide with the witness's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. How do courts resolve that battle of the constitutional rights? Let's do a quick Team Justice Law School class. Because justice matters. So first, Matt Gaetz tells us that he is the subject of a Department of Justice child sex trafficking investigation. And then Matt Gaetz tells us that he really needs a pardon. Looks like justice is barreling down on Matt Gaetz. And justice matters. So we've got to talk about Matt Gaetz again today because the walls are closing in and justice is bearing down on Matt Gaetz. And justice matters. So we now know, courtesy of the testimony of Dr. Tobin, an expert pulmonologist, the precise moment when the life left George Floyd's body. And we also know that for 3 more minutes after George Floyd was dead, Derek Chauvin continued to press his knee into George Floyd's neck. The evidence has shown Derek Chauvin is guilty of murdering George Floyd. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So the month of March has come and gone. Time really flies when you're fighting for voting rights, fighting for a healthy democracy, fighting for justice. Let's do a quick recap of the legal stories of the month that was March 2021. Because justice matters. So we've just seen a videotape of two local Virginia police officers assaulting a U.S. Army lieutenant, an African-American U.S. Army lieutenant, and that lieutenant has now brought federal suit against those two police officers. Let's talk about why that suit should be successful, and then let's talk about why America is in desperate need of true police reform. Because equal justice for all matters. So let's talk about George Floyd, Lieutenant Karen Nazario, Breonna Taylor, and the broken promise of the Fourth Amendment. Because the people's constitutional right against unreasonable searches and seizures, like justice, matters. So let's try to grade today's defense witnesses in the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. Who won the day on the justice scorecard? Because justice matters. So in the Derek Chauvin trial today for the murder of George Floyd, we heard from the defense's expert medical examiner, expert forensic pathologist, Dr. David Fowler. And I'm actually pleased to report that after watching Dr. Fowler testify, I feel like we're actually one step closer to justice for George Floyd and his family. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So Matt Gaetz' troubles continue. Let's talk about what it means when the FBI obtains a search warrant for a cell phone belonging to a sitting member of Congress. Because justice matters. So we just learned some more information that proves that the Trump campaign directly colluded with Russia, with the Kremlin, with Russian intelligence to gain unfair advantage in the 2016 presidential election. And I really like this story, but not because of the information Joe Biden's executive branch just revealed to the American people, but for what the revelation of the information itself signals. Because to me, it tends to signal that justice may be just around the corner. And justice matters. So one of the founding members for the Oath Keepers organization, one of the groups that attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, just pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. So it's about to get real for the Oath Keepers. And that's a good thing. Because justice matters. So did you see the story that was just reported about a Trump administration official who served in the job for only 4 days, from January 16th to January 20th, a guy named Michael Ellis? Let's talk about that. Because smoking out what Donald Trump tried to do to our national security, like justice, matters. So the Derek Chauvin trial is to the jury. And the only thing left to be done is justice. And justice matters. So Derek Chauvin was found guilty of all counts. That is a good day for justice. And justice matters. So now that Derek Chauvin has been found guilty by the jury of murdering George Floyd, let's talk about how sentencing works and what the likely sentence for Derek Chauvin might be. Because justice matters. So there's an important Senate committee hearing today that may get us one step closer to dislodging corrupt Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. Why is that important? I don't know. Could it be because justice matters? So Justice Amy Coney Barrett is in the news again because she has to decide whether she's going to participate in or recuse herself from a case in which she has a conflict. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So we have to talk about another shooting of a reportedly unarmed African-American citizen named Andrew Brown Jr. Let's talk about actual policing reform and whether there is any hope of achieving it. Because justice matters. So given the court proceedings of the last week, it looks like Department of Justice prosecutors and federal judges agree that Donald Trump poses a continued danger. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg may have just made one of the worst exculpatory claims, a claim trying to get himself out of trouble, that I ever heard as a prosecutor. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So we are learning more about the fatal shooting of Edward Brown Jr. in North Carolina. But the problem is we're learning about it from Edward Brown's family rather than from law enforcement. Let's talk about that. Because the need for law enforcement transparency, like justice, matters. So a federal judge issued search warrants for Rudy Giuliani's stuff. Today, we took one big step on the road to justice. And justice matters. So now that Rudy Giuliani has had his home searched and his office searched and his computers searched and his cell phones searched, what might be the next big decision Rudy Giuliani is going to have to make? Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. So can we just have a little bit of fun with what Rudy Giuliani told Fox viewers about the federal search warrants that were executed at his home and at his office? Because sometimes on a Friday night, humor, like justice, matters.